Josh Bumgardner with the Greater Tampa Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank the viewers that are tuning in to our 2019 candidate interview series. Today we're interviewing for mayor in the city of Tampa. At the Chamber, we focus on policy, not politics, and while we do not endorse candidates, we feel it's important that we get candidates and their answers on business questions in front of our membership. We're excited today to have Dick Greco Jr., who's running for mayor, joining us. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for doing this, and I thank those who are taking the time and effort to watch.
Absolutely. So we're 5 weeks from Election Day at this point, getting into the final stretch. What's the message that you and your campaign want to deliver to the voters before they head to the polls?
Well, what I'd like to deliver is take a look at all of the candidates. Take a look at their background, training, and experience. I think if you would look at mine, if I can have a moment to go into some of the things I've done, I'd appreciate that time. But I think I have a very varied background. Started out as an iron worker and laborer in 2 of the local unions here, and building several things within the city of Tampa, the old Tampa Stadium, Big Bend Power Plant, the Anclote River Power Plant. Worked there as an iron worker. I was a deputy sheriff when I went to law school. I majored in law enforcement at Auburn University. Again, deputy sheriff, Houston, Harris County, Texas, while I went to law school. Came back to Tampa, worked as a clerk at the 2nd District Court of Appeal. Then I was a prosecutor here in Hillsborough County, an assistant state attorney. I was also an assistant county attorney. And in that capacity, I worked as a litigator in the construction litigation section. I was in various private practices here, had my own firm with several other persons, also practiced on my own here. So I owned my own small business here several times as I practiced. I was also with a couple other firms here. Most of, or the majority of the time during my working life, though, I spent on the bench as a judge, both a county judge and circuit judge, and also as what is called a senior judge, about 20 years on the bench being a judge, handling all kinds of cases, civil divisions, criminal divisions, domestic violence, probate, guardianship, etc.
Okay. I want to chat a little bit about workforce housing. We hear from some that it's a borderline crisis. There's definitely a need for more affordable workforce housing in the city of Tampa. If elected, what policy or zoning changes would you implement to address this need?
Well, workforce housing, of course, I'm not certain that that's the absolute word that everyone uses. I take it you mean housing for individuals who may work in a certain locale rather than having to live in a location far away that at this point makes it very difficult for them to get to work, especially for those who have no vehicle and are relying on some type of public transportation. Is that what we're talking about?
Correct, yes.
Yes, I think that is a concern for quite a few of the different business areas you talk about, whether you talk about the West Shore Business District, University of South Florida area, even the downtown business district, talking about how do we have housing that is affordable, convenient for the persons who are working here. Because as you probably are aware, housing in much of the West Shore area is fairly expensive. Housing downtown is very expensive. The same in places such as University of South Florida. So I think what the city has to do is to look at any and all avenues it can, along with any and all entities that can help it provide these types of things. It probably will involve some type of public, whether it is a public entities with the city, the county, probably the state, federal government working along, because you have to generally get funds for these types of things, not only to build, but to maintain housing, if that's going to be an option. We have to look at possibly some of the charitable organizations and the those sectors that can help in some of these areas. We may have to look at issues like you looked at zoning, because in some of these instances, we probably be looking at placing this type of housing in an area where maybe it doesn't have the density requirements that we would require for these types of houses. Your first, I think, question and what you asked or what you stated was, is this a crisis? I think for some people it is a crisis. I think there is no doubt, though, that if you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, almost anyone who we talked about, whether they're candidates or these entities that are interested in workforce housing, wouldn't at least put it on a scale of at least 7 on a scale of 10, if not higher.
Great. Shifting a little bit, I want to talk about the budget process. Some would argue that the budget process is one of the biggest responsibilities of the mayor and working with city council, obviously. We're hearing from state economists and budget leaders at the state level that we may see a dip in the economy in a couple of years. If elected, that would fall under your tenure, your term. How would you manage that? How would you address the budget? Would there be cuts, tax increases? How would you manage the process if there was indeed a downturn in the economy?
Okay. Well, those, of course, are great questions. The actual budget itself, I don't know if you've ever looked into that, but it's very, very difficult to find out exactly what is going to be available. I can tell you that I believe the new mayor will take office, he or she, on the first day of May of 2019, and I believe 90 days later, a budget will have to be presented. Keep hearing different things about the budget. I don't know if we'll be in a deficit. I have heard we will not be, but of course the city does have a lot of debt. I don't think that's something that is not known. Whether we'll have a surplus or not, I don't know. Certainly those are things that have to be looked at. You know, taking dips in the economy, that could happen. And you certainly have to make provisions in your budget for that. I'm sure, as you know, you have to have reserves. Really and truly, I mean, I know it's on a gigantic scale because we're probably talking about a budget of about $1 billion. I certainly don't have that at home, but just like the city, I, and along with everyone else, has to make provisions in case those things happen. You know, everybody tells you, your planners, et cetera, hey, you should have 3 to 6 months of reserves so that you can pay bills in case something like that happened, et cetera. City needs to do the same thing. The number one thing I would say this, though, for the budget is I want it to be a transparent process. I want the public to be a part of it if they can. I want them to know what's going on. I want them to be able to see where their money is going, where it's being spent. I would plan on putting the budget as soon as I could online and or in the media so that persons who are interested can see that. What's going on. Working on the budget, of course, you're allowed. The city has a chief financial officer, so we will try to get the best person that we could, if we don't have them already, to do that and perform that function and role. And then we would have the best people we could get. There's plenty of people here, even locally, that know a lot about budgets, a lot about how to make them, to help us, spend our money wisely and do the things we need to do to make our city a success.
Great. The permitting process. We're hearing from some members, folks in the community, that it's becoming more and more difficult to obtain a permit. Of course, we want to see a safe process through the permitting process, but we also want to see an efficient one that allows businesses and residents of Tampa to move on with their projects. How would you address permitting and some of the difficulties that we're hearing if elected?
Well, that's a very good question also. Without throwing different groups under the bus here, I have heard that from some. I don't want to say who. I'm not going to tell you that they've said it's an inordinate process, but I think you used a word that's very good to use. It's a little bit inefficient. I'd like to find out why. Is it because, do we need better technology? Do we need to have better personnel? Do we need more personnel? Is it an educational issue, etc.? You're right. There are rules, there are policies, there are regulations that have to be looked at. But certainly, I wouldn't want anyone to feel that the city was standing in their way during at least the permitting process and it taking an inordinate amount of time. There again, I'd like to find out, what the groups that may be complaining, what is an inordinate amount of time to them? I mean, some may be 3 weeks, some may say a month. I don't know exactly what their number is, but I've heard and been told that there are some inefficiencies. Unfortunately, it's a bureaucracy. If it's a bureaucracy under the city, I'll find out why it is taking an inordinate amount of time and what we can do to fix it, whether it's personnel, whether it's technology, whatever. We'll get to the bottom of it and we'll make the process as streamlined as we can.
Great. Home rule. we're hearing from local governments across the state that there is growing frustration, that there's this Tallahassee knows best mentality, that preemption is becoming a problem. Do you agree with that notion? If so, how would you as mayor work to build a strong working relationship with our state legislative delegation?
Well, that's a must, and it's a must under my platform. One of my words that I use is the words connected. And not only do I feel that the mayor's office needs to be connected with neighborhoods, but we also need to be connected with every governmental entity, starting with the mayor's office and its city council of this city, the mayor's office and the county commission, all of the county commissioners, the mayor's office and every board, every agency, every administration, not only here and not only in Tallahassee, but in our region. We have the fourth largest region basically in the Southeast United States, only behind Washington, Atlanta, Miami, and Tampa. We have a gigantic port. I think our port is #1 in tonnage in all of Florida, a world-class airport. Those both have authorities that aren't run by the city of Tampa. Our bus line is the Hillsborough Area Rapid Transit Authority, not run by the city of Tampa. So to answer your question, I would do it with the legislative delegation just like I would and want to and will with every other entity, and that is make the calls you need to make, sit down, let's have coffee, let's meet, let's get together, let's talk. We will not get anything done if we don't do it on a regional basis. And you said something very, very important, which is Tallahassee. That's where some of the money has to come from. That's where some of the cooperation has to come from. I do not want to be known as a mayor that thinks, I am so important that, everything has to come to me. I am more than willing, able, and will meet with any and everyone to get things done. We have to do that, or none of these projects that we talk about that are wonderful, that we hear about, can happen without the cooperation of dozens of different entities.
Right. Economic development. P3s, public-private partnerships, have become an asset for local governments across the country. What opportunities for P3s do you see in the city of Tampa?
Well, I think one of the things you can look at right now is what has happened in Tampa. I mean, I think our mayor now, Buckhorn, has done a great job. Tampa has really flown with him. I'd like to say I'm going to make it soar. But one of the things you can look at is look at the difference in Tampa in just a few years. I mean, it wasn't just the city that caused all of what we have. Now, on one hand, it has caused some growing pains. Let's face it, our traffic is a little harder to deal with. Some of our infrastructure, I think, has suffered because we have so many persons that are using it now that weren't using it before. But there again, we need to embrace it because all of these things are making our city better. Even things that aren't in our city, in our region, make our city better. And, there's a saying that the rising tide rises all ships that are in the harbor. So we have to embrace what we have here. We have to realize that what has happened makes us great. What has happened makes people want to live here. They want to move here. They want to be here. They want to raise their children here. They want to be educated here. They want to play here. So we need to embrace what we have. We have great examples on what happens when public-private partnerships get together. What I'm stating, and I'll go back to what you said before, we have certain policies and the city has to make sure that the growth, those types of things happen in a way that is not harmful. But I do not want to stand in the way of seeing our city succeed. And so far, it's done phenomenally.
Absolutely. And it's a pretty nice transition into transportation. Obviously, in November, a transportation referendum that the chamber supported passed overwhelmingly and is injecting a new level of dollars into transportation. We all have lists of projects that we'd like to see get done. But my question for you is, if elected, what is the one transportation project you'd like to see out of the gates get done?
All right. Well, first, I'd like to comment on the tax itself. We taxed ourselves as individuals. I was in favor of that. I voted for it. But the reason for it is, and why it's something that's important, is that we live in a county of only, 1.4 million people. That tax, however, is going to be paid by anyone who comes into our county and buys anything, whether it's you know, something at a grocery store or a convenience store, a gallon of gas, rent a car, whatever they do. And there are the number of, I want to say 22 million people that came to Hillsborough County last year for one reason or another. So what I'm getting at is that tax will be paid not only by us, but by millions and millions of other people. So really, I think it's a win-win situation for us. One thing I would like to see, I think, is on a short-term basis, I think is what I could concentrate on first. And those would be things that they may seem small, but I think would help with some of our gridlock. And that is, you know, first, I don't want to say that some of these things I've heard, the plans that other people have and exposed and or espoused are not good ones, but they're going to be complex. It might be a while in the making, but I think things we could do quickly with some of that, if we had the money, are things like synchronization of our traffic signals and or, you know, durational times. I've noticed that some of the traffic lights, if not all of them, they're timed the exact same. So if you're sitting there at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's the exact same as they are at 4 to 6 or 7 to 9 at the afternoon, or 7 to 9 in the morning. So things like that could make traffic move quicker. You know, I'm sure there's software available for things like that. In some of our newer roads you're seeing, or some of the old ones, we're having lanes put in for, you know, buses to be able to pull off the main thoroughfares and load and unload so they don't block traffic as they stop every block or two or whatever. Some things like that could be done. I understand it would take dollars to buy properties to do that, because you'd have to have some space, but that's a short-term way to make things move quicker. We might have to engage and have some type of either law enforcement or hire maybe traffic patrol officers or to direct traffic like you see in some places during peak times or periods. Or, you know, as an instance like downtown, sometimes you get a large convention at the convention center, something going on maybe at the Amalie and something else big in downtown. Traffic seems to back up. Maybe we would have to have some type of, you know, traffic control, either devices change there or persons that could do that. There are quite a few things I could think we could do that would be short term. I'm not talking about solutions, but help. I mean, we're all, I think, used to, and anywhere we go in the world or in the United States, bigger cities. Did I lose you there? I don't. See, we've got to understand there's going to be traffic in the mornings. There's going to be traffic in the afternoons. Maybe we can deal with that and help alleviate it. I don't think, you know, we're not going to have a period of no traffic. I mean, Tampa's not like it was when I was born here in 1954. It's a big city now. But there are some things I think we can do on a short term. Long term, I think that would take getting all of these powers that be together and seeing what would be the best solution to spend long-term dollars on. Because not only do we have to worry about building something, we also would have to have money to maintain things and operate them.
Absolutely. Leadership. What, in your opinion, is the role of Tampa's mayor? And if elected, how do you see that role evolving over your term?
Well, I think it is an absolute leadership position. I appreciate you saying that word. I don't want to get into be known as, you know, you mentioned home rule before, and you know, this isn't something like Brexit where I'm, you know, won't plan to take over and be the dictator over this city from afar and it's in a bubble. But the mayor of Tampa is in a very unique position. It's a strong mayor system here that doesn't occur in a lot of cities across the United States of America. This is the largest city within the entire region, but I'm not saying we're more important than anyone else, but the mayor of Tampa needs to take a leadership role, which is what I will do and what I think I have indicated in my word connected. I would be the one and have no problem with trying to connect with all of our, you know, other counties that are around the area to help in any way that we can do it to achieve the success that we've achieved so far in all of these projects we talk about, because it can't happen without the cooperation and without the communication with all of these entities that we're talking about.
We've discussed several important policy initiatives. Is there a policy priority of your campaign that we haven't discussed? Is there something that you would like to reemphasize that's a priority for our viewers?
Well, I think I said the word connected. That's I think my number one priority. I want to make sure our neighborhoods are involved with the mayor's office. I think we didn't speak a lot about infrastructure, you know, the things that the city has above and below the ground, and some of the things that we have that really they're part of infrastructure, but they're not necessarily ours. You know, many of our roads are not in good condition, but, you know, just as an example, Bayshore Boulevard, Bay to Bay, Gandy, Dale Mabry, Himes, those are not city roads. I mean, they belong to other entities. 275, not a city road. However, we have a lot of our persons using them, you know, but we can't just do what we want with those. So those are things we have to look at. Again, that gets to my, you know, I need to be connected with all of those entities that have something to do with that. So when they need to be repaired, need to be maintained, or we need to work on our own pipes, et cetera, that run underneath those, you know, we can do it without wasting valuable time and, you know, efforts, and also with the least amount of effect and detrimental things that happen to our citizens that use them. But you know, I think you've hit everything and that I am about and that I would like to see, you know, in my administration.
Great. Well, with so much time, so many topics to cover, if our viewers wanted to take a deeper dive, where can they go to learn more about your campaign?
More about my campaign and myself, you'd find at grecoformayor.com, and we have an entire website there. We also have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all those social media outlets. And again, I'd like to thank them for listening in, and thank you for allowing me to interview here.
Well, absolutely. Likewise, on behalf of our 1,400 members, our board of directors, thanks for taking the time and thanks for your willingness to serve in an elected capacity. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.